organized manner. But I also see the value to the taxpayer of making sure that we get as much use out of that equipment as we possibly can before we take the step of purchase.
And the other thing too, though, as much use as you can, and then at some point it's broken down and you sell it for junk.
It's a balance.
Versus, is there still some retail value left in that vehicle? So there is a balance.
So is there a way we can do kind of both, like a year plan, but also then once it hits that year, do the point plan to see if it's ready for replacement? Can you do a combination?
Oh, I think you could definitely do a combination of the two. I mean, I'm not married to any particular way. Right. I just want to present you what some of the communities do. I think it's important as a city that we have something in place. Again, from a budgetary standpoint, in some years we're going to get hit pretty hard. We're going to be coming to you and say, I need to replace this, this, and this, and this, and it's going to be a real dollar shock. And so we like to spread that out over time.
Well, I'm all for spreading it out. I think the point system, believe me, the point system actually helps to accomplish what we're talking about, Corey, is that you now balance the maintenance curve on the vehicle versus the purchase price of a new vehicle off the fleet, and we are able to maybe do some planning and spread that out a little bit more.
But I think it's, like I said, it's something that you need in front of you. I mean, if there's consensus, we'll definitely work something up with the point system and the maintenance. But for example, just the equipment we've listed for Public Works at $2.8 million. If we said we're just going to replace a piece, everything within the first 15 years, I mean, that's $193,000 a year.
Yeah.
Right. If we say we're going to let our pickups last 20 years, and everything lasts 20 years, that's still $145,000 a year at today's cost. So no matter what we do, there's a fairly substantial sum associated with it.
Yeah, and that's today's dollars, of course.
That's correct.
Not tomorrow's dollars. So.
Correct. And the plan that I just passed out, what we did was everything that was 10 years old and older, come up with a number. And so if you look at the bottom of the second page, if we were to come to you in 2015 following that plan, something tells me that would be a problem. There's over $800,000 in equipment that needed to be replaced. But when I say that, there's a pickup that will be 18 years old. There's a pickup, two that will be 17 years old. There'll be one that'll be 16, one that'll be 14. So, I mean, they're getting up there in age. And it is rough duty, and you know how snowplows. We were down a truck last year. They break at the most unopportune, critical time when they're under a lot of load.
Do the approximate costs on here include any trade-in value, or is it just...
No, that's just...
Okay, so...
That's what we looked at.
These would be potentially worst-case costs.
That's correct.
Okay.
Those are numbers we've received in the last 2 years as far as bids.
Okay.
Just past experience. Also, we did a little internet check to see what items are going for now, so there's no trade-in value.
I like the idea of there being a policy, whether it's based on years or amount of miles, or my guess is on some of the heavy equipment run time, run hours.
Right.
And then combined with a point system. I think that some of the things that have caused heartburn in the past is when someone comes before council looking to get a vehicle replaced, they don't make a very compelling case as to why that vehicle should be replaced. And I think there should be something in there about this is the kind of information that you bring when you're wanting to get your vehicle replaced, even though it may be budgeted for. The amount of miles, the amount of, the maintenance record, some kind of photographic evidence if there's some defects, things of that nature, so that anybody, whether they're sitting on the desk, sitting in the council chambers, or watching YouTube videos, can hear the discussion and say, yes, this is a vehicle that needs to be replaced per our policy.
And that's definitely not a problem to do. I mean, we can provide you additional detail when we come to ask you for a replacement vehicle. But there will be some cases where if we have a policy like this, you may question, the maintenance may be starting to build up a little bit. You've reached that 10 years or 12 years or 12,000 hours. But if you get to, the point, well, let's not do that one. And, okay, we throw that into the next year. Well, I have things in the following year. But something that if there's support, it's something we need to try to hold to as best we can. Understand economic downturns. Understand in a year when money's tight that maybe we need to push everything back a year. But if we have a policy, this is one of those ones where it really starts to impact us if we keep pushing things out.
I have a question, probably more towards Cheryl and towards Laura, with the vehicle and equipment replacement program and having a budget set beside that. Does that kind of lend itself to some of the things we put in place this year with the new strategic planning programs and things? And the other piece I worried about with that, when you have people pulling into the pot, it'll take a little while for that to grow, and then maybe we have an expense beyond it. So is it really just kind of a paper dragon, so to speak, because it's there, but when you need more than that, you have to go somewhere else for it anyway. So is it really the best way to manage those dollars, or do you just figure that into the capital expenses as part of the budget plan each year as the individual funds?
I'm just writing so I can answer those parts for you. First, with the budget component, the first part of your question is kind of when we did the budget this year, what we looked at. One of the goals that you all set was kind of that whole infrastructure management.
Right.
We did not deal with the capital projects. That's one of the things that we're going to come back and talk about, kind of the capital projects. We did, however, leave some reserves beyond what the best practice number is for reserve to be able to deal with the purchase of capital equipment, as well as capital projects that we might need in Parks and Recreation, streets. You know, we're going to bring you a pretty comprehensive capital improvement program and ask for some priorities to be set on where we spend this money. The second part of your question about having a pool, you will need some time to kind of build up a certain amount of money from the various departments to be able to actually purchase. So you're probably going to initially start to make your purchases from what you have in your reserves until you can get a program like this up and running. It's very similar to when you start to look at being self-insured as being self-insured with health insurance. You need to have some money built up to be able to pay claims before you actually get to the point where you can really hold your own and be self-insured. So you will need to build up some money.
And I would add that I know one way to avoid these big spikes, in addition to building up a pool, would be to use that pool for debt service to level things out.
Yes.
Whether it's for a capital improvement program for the pool or for a purchase of equipment, interest rates generally are favorable. The city has a good credit rating. There's lease purchase agreements. It avoids big spikes if you have bigger projects. It's kind of like the mill levy thing. If you keep it flat, you can plan and avoid big spikes up and down for various projects. So you could build a pool to use for debt service if you had to.
Right.
Part of the capital discussion will be debt.
Sure.
We'll be looking at and talking with council about kind of the comfort level with debt, because capital projects are generally done through debt, financing. So we will need to look at debt to be able to do the capital projects.
A perfect example would be like Moonlight Road was very, very, very costly. If you wanted to pay cash for that, like everybody tries to do on a personal level, you have a personal budget, you try to do cash, but it's like buying a house with cash. Would you ever save up enough money to buy a home before you were too old to care? And then you couldn't take care of it. Same kind of thing with big projects like that. Mm-hmm. You would never be able to, and then you would be doing that project at the exclusion of everything else. You had only saved up enough money for Moonlight Road for years upon end. What else would you do? Nothing, because you'd be paying that off if you used it in cash.
I have two questions. One is, do we, and maybe this is beyond the scope of this discussion, but do we need all the vehicles, that we have? Do we really, has anyone ever done any kind of analysis as to whether they're being used on a regular enough basis?
Well, that's one of my jobs here with City. I want to make sure that we're being very efficient in what we do. And if there's areas that we don't need a vehicle, or from a long-term perspective, that's something we can do without, that's something that'll be on the table.
So on any given day, at least when you drive by the parking lot here, there's a lot of trucks and